son. Where'd you find this?
Don't be offended by the truth. They be offended because you called out the truth. Simple as that. They don't want to hear any other narrative that makes them look bad.
One thing I can't stand at this big grown age is somebody who acts like cause and effect does not exist. Like, yes, your actions caused this outcome. Yes, what you did lit the match. Like, why are you surprised and playing victim?
Guys, Chico. They never lie.
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late. They cancel last minute. Forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll.
Examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.
It was a way of making me feel that they were a part.
You see it on the screen. It's the government that changed schooling is pretty much shut it down. They got state pupils out there. They got brains flowing. They got the brains machines.
Good morning. Peace and blessings to the good people. I hope all is well. Friday is right around the corner. Shout outs to my poets, writers, content creators, all of that good stuff. We have a special episode this morning. We didn't get to do this yesterday, so I'm glad we got to spin back and have this segment for the week for the people. You know, every Wednesday we have a show where it's more or less for educational purposes. We tend to steer away from a lot of the darker stuff. I got Sydney in the building. You know who she is. If you don't, get familiar. I'm going to bring her up. Let her do her thing. Do me a solid repost, share, let the people know that we are on. Yeah, and again, a happy Thursday to the peoples. Let's get this show started. Yep.
Hello. How's your morning?
Nice rainy day. Nice and rainy. I love it.
It is cloudy here. Oh no, it's pretty sunny. It was cloudy this morning, but that has since burned away. So we're apparently going to be getting like in 2 weeks, 90 to 100-degree weather. So I'm like, oh, fun. That'll be not nice.
Yeah. I told you I'm a winter baby. Y'all can have this heat. Look, we didn't get the chance to do this the last couple weeks. So I said, let me go ahead and move what I had scheduled so we can go ahead and get you back in the field. So I'm gonna turn it over to you. I'm gonna let you do your thing. I'll be right here, and the floor is yours. You already know the drill. Shout outs to the people.
All right. So I picked this topic today because of a video that I watched probably 2 weeks ago, courtesy of Tom Powell Jr. If you ever get a chance to watch his stuff, definitely worth it. He's very funny. He showed a video of a woman talking about how she teaches her kids and was basically saying that everything that we know about science is an indoctrination and it's not real. That basically the gist of it is that dinosaurs don't exist and we can't possibly know anything from the fossils that we find. If you, in her words, if you took a chicken, the bones of a chicken, a pig, and a cow or something like that, and put them all next to each other, you never know what you were looking at. And I had to talk about this because, for one, with my background, with my past experiences, I have some education in fossils, bones, what you can identify from them. Obviously, I am a scientific person and I know from my own research, from other people's research, that animals in the past did exist. I know it can butt heads with people's religious beliefs, and I respect that. But for myself, I have no doubt that they have existed. And so I wanted to talk to you guys today about what we can actually understand from fossils, what you can know from bones. And this is going to kind of have two different approaches where I'm going to talk about animals themselves, and I'm also going to bring in a little bit of forensic, or not archaeology, paleontology, I think, because these tactics that scientists use to identify bones, to figure out where the bones came from, what the animals lived through, went through, how they were, those apply to techniques that even forensic investigators use to solve murders and to figure out what happened, the cause of death to a person who has been killed, or injured. So, yeah, I thought this would be a really fun topic to discuss, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of really interesting stuff that you can actually find out from bones. So, I thought it'd be fun to talk about. Just a little background of my experience. Besides the research that I do, I love learning about fossils, finding out how we know about the things that we know in history. I worked at a marine research center in Santa Cruz, and part of my job was to give tours of the outside of the facility. And we had both a gray whale skeleton and a blue whale skeleton on display. The blue whale skeleton is the largest I think it's the largest complete blue whale skeleton in the world that, as my supervisor joked, that is not going to fall on your head. There's another one, I believe, in the Museum of British History, but it's hanging from the ceiling. Ours is like right on the ground, so you can actually go look at it and see. And we would talk about them. We'd talk about the bones. We'd talk about different aspects of the whale and what you can learn from those bones. And believe it or not, you can actually tell a lot about a species' origins and how they lived just based on their bodies. So one of the biggest distinctive features in bones is their composition, not their chemical composition, but like their structure composition. You can tell if an animal was underwater or was a flying animal or was a land animal based on the density of that bone. For our blue whale skeleton, you can tell that she was a creature that lived underwater because her bones were porous, kind of like a sponge. And when she was alive, those pores were filled with oil. For those of you that don't know, oil is more buoyant than water. And when you are a very, very heavy animal, they can weigh, I believe blue whales can weigh as much as like 16 elephants. Imagine trying to propel that through the water. They need a little additional help because their muscles and energy is not going to be enough to keep them afloat. So they have oil in their bones, which help them be more buoyant than they would have been and not have to exert as much energy into keeping them close to the surface and allowing them to not use as much energy when returning to the surface. So yeah, in marine mammals, you'll find their bones to be porous. And so if scientists in the field have found a body, a collection of bones that they don't recognize, they can already tell whether the animal lived on land, lived in the ocean, or was a flying animal just based on their bones. If it was a flying animal, such as with birds, their bones would actually be hollow. The birds or other animals that have to live in the sky will have very, very distinctly lightweight bones. You can actually feel this on the blue whale as well. But with birds, obviously they can't weigh that much because if you're going to fly through the sky, you're not going to want to exert all your energy just doing the only mode of transportation that you have, or the most effective mode of transportation that you have. And so they will actually have, like, if you open their bones up, it will be hollow inside. I believe they still have like the bone marrow and tissue, like it's not just empty, full of air. But its purpose is to make the bones as light as possible. With land animals, you're going to have solid bones. Obviously, you don't want to have hollow bones if you're living on the ground, because if you put too much weight on a hollow bone, it's going to fracture. You're not going to be able to take as much impact. Land animals are more frequently, depending on the type of species you are more involved in physical altercations with other animals. So you're going to have to withstand a greater amount of force than a bird would. That's why a bird getting hit by a car is going to be fatal, whereas a living or land creature getting hit by a car is slightly less fatal. Obviously, getting hit by a car in any circumstance is not a good thing. But birds cannot take as much force as I keep wanting to say living creature. They're all living, as a land creature. So at the very beginning, if you have no idea what these animals are, you can already tell where this animal had been living. But beyond that, you can still tell a tremendous amount about that animal's life from what the structure was. You can tell if an animal is four-legged, two-legged, obviously if it had fins or wings, based on the structure of their bones, when you put their bones together. One of the nice things through history is that because of their purpose, bones have largely remained relatively unchanged. It's just the formation inside the body has changed. So how the bones have been put together, or like the lengths, or how you put all the puzzle pieces together would change. But for the most part, bones are still relatively structurally the same. You're going to have, for long bones, which are the ones in the arms and the legs, you're going to have the long piece. You're going to have the balls at the end because they have to go in the joints so they can move around. For the head, it's generally going to be a dome. You're going to usually have a jaw of some sort. You're going to have, like, the little pieces are generally going to be like fingers and toes, or potentially ears, ear bones, stuff like that. So they're going to vary, obviously, per animal. A bat arm is not going to look the same as a human arm, is not going to look the same as a hippo, but the bones themselves still tell you a lot about their purposes. For animals that are, or for legs, you can always tell because they're pretty much going to be the biggest bone for the most part. They have to be, especially if you're if you're a land-bearing animal, a land-going animal, they're going to have to be weight-bearing. So you can tell the size of the animal by the size of the leg bone, and you can generally estimate the height, the weight, how much they traveled, by the size. Forensic investigators can identify whether or not a person was male or female, generally from the size of the bone that they find. You're also able to identify if this being was a young animal or a older animal based on the bones. So when you find the bone pieces, even if you don't know what that animal is, you can still generally tell where the bone came from, what the purpose of the bone was, what the qualities of that creature were. And as you find more of those bone pieces, putting it together will also tell you a lot about that particular creature. For example, if they have extremely long finger bones, it's very likely those were wings. If they have very short arm bones, but very long, thick leg bones, they were very likely going to be two-legged animals. If they have four roughly equivalent thick leg bones, they were likely a four-legged animal. If they didn't, this sounds so well, no duh, but I gotta say it, if they have a very long skeleton and no leg bones, or very, very tiny leg bones and very tiny arm bones, they probably swam. They probably were not a walking animal. And fun fact, whales, you can still find the remnants of their hips in the body. When you have a skeleton of a whale, you'll find two tiny little floating pieces that go back where their hips are, or where the hips would have been. You can find those on whales, and those are remnants of when they were once land-dwelling creatures. Another fun fact, whales were ocean animals. that then migrated on land, and then they remigrated back into the ocean because that's where the food was. So whales technically lived in the ocean first, and then they went on land. And then, yeah, I always found that really interesting, where we always think like, oh yeah, they were creatures living in the ocean, or they're creatures living on land, and then they went in the ocean. But basically everything started off in the ocean at one point. Anyway, so yeah, you can identify what the animal likely did in its lifetime as a form of transportation just on the structure, the format of the bones. And again, you can also figure out the age based once you have a lot of the bones put together based on different characteristics within the bones themselves, such as young, very, very young animals. I don't know if it applies across the board or if it's just mammalian animals, but the plates in their head won't be fused all the way yet, because when an animal comes out of a birth canal, its head kind of has to maneuver a little bit so it can come out of the mother. And so it has a soft head. That's why it's so important to like watch your baby's head when they're younger, because you can accidentally hurt them. But their head will not be fused yet, and that comes with adulthood. You can also see like the growth plates, especially like on the legs, the arms, where the bones are growing, because bones don't just like expand outward, they grow in certain regions, and they kind of build outward. And you can see that. Additionally, let me double check if this is all. I know. Okay, so I think it's just otoliths. I don't know if. Okay, you can do it with reptiles as well. Some animals, it looks like reptilians, dinosaurs. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't want to read the whole article yet. I don't want to just like, okay. I know for fish specifically, I don't know if this is the case for all bones, but fish specifically, you can actually age a fish by its ear bone, because it basically has, like a tree, growth rings. And as it ages, it grows more rings on its ear bone. It's called an otolith. So you can actually tell the age of the animal based on the rings. I know there are other ways to tell the age of bones. I'm just not familiar with all of the methods at the top of my head. But you can generally use size, you can use bone density. There are other elements that you can use. But I can't quite remember exactly, because it does differ based on the type of animal that you're looking at. Mammals are going to be different than dinosaurs, which are going to be different than reptiles. Another fun fact, dinosaurs are technically not reptiles. They're closer to birds. Although some prehistoric reptiles that look like dinosaurs were more reptile than bird. So that's another thing that you can also tell from the bones, is how it would be characterized in the animal tree. Another cool thing that you can tell from bones is trauma that the animal has endured. This is where forensic paleontology, forensic science really comes in. And this is where a lot of the overlap is, at least in my opinion. When animals are exposed to injuries, when they're exposed to illnesses, when they're exposed to, like, say, starvation, all of that is logged into their bodies. We obviously know it from the physical symptoms that are showing up on our skin and like our deformities and stuff like that. But believe it or not, it's actually going to show up in the bones as well. Some diseases will show up directly in our bones, such as like rickets. Rickets is caused by vitamin C deficiency, I believe. Double check on that. Vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiency, which used to be a huge problem in history for people in general, basically before the 1900s. It was a big problem. It basically causes a child's bones to soften and allows them to warp out of shape. One of the most common visual symptoms is they'll have bowed legs, where instead of having straight legs, their legs will go outward. Like here, there's a picture of it. And so you can see that in their bone structure, where their bones will literally be curved instead of straight. And they might also have issues with their teeth. They might have issues with their skull. They might have curvature of the spine. A lot of different deficiencies can cause symptoms that appear in the bones. Certain deficiencies will eat away at the bones. You can also see like discoloration. Let me look up all of them. Let's see. Bone issues. Obviously, lower levels of calcium, since calcium make up our bones predominantly. You can have, my goodness, there's a lot. Rheumatoid arthritis. These are all things that can increase bone loss. Rheumatoid arthritis, which is an inflammatory disease. It can contribute to bone loss. Malabsorption syndrome, such as Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, celiac disease, sex hormone deficiency, also called hypogonadism, where you have an unnatural amount of hormones in your body. In women, it can cause brittle bones. With men, it can cause issues with bone development as well. Hyperparathyroidism, because then you have an excess release of calcium from the bones, and it can cause fractures and osteoporosis, which again is reduction in the density of bones. Chronic kidney disease can affect bone formation and cause metabolic bone diseases. And those are just some of them. A lot of these diseases, I don't know the intricacies. I'm definitely not an expert in this area, but good scientists would be able to tell almost exactly what disease that animal was likely suffering from based on the manifestations in the bones, whether the pores are really big or the bone is literally eaten away, or maybe the bone is smaller than it should be based on the estimated age of the animal. So there's a number of ways that you can tell how that animal came to lose the density in their bone, the integrity of their bone. You can also tell if they have certain diseases, certain illnesses can also impact the like the physical appearance of the bone. You can have, if I remember correctly, if you have like a hemorrhage or an injury that caused a lot of bleeding, the bones will be darkened in certain areas. You can also see injuries left over in bones. For example, I just watched a documentary yesterday about early humans from roughly 8,000 years ago, and they found they had a human skeleton that the man had an arrow in his bone, and you could tell that he survived that injury because bone had started to continue to grow around that arrow. And so the scientists were able to tell from that injury that he was likely alive for years after that initial injury. So he actually survived getting shot. I think it was his rib, not his arm. But he basically got shot with the arrow, and the bone continued to grow and just grew around it. Another example of this one's not exactly an injury per se, but just bone growth can tell you a lot about what a person was doing. This isn't really relevant anymore, or at least common. But with the time period before cars, when people would frequently use horses to get around, I believe it was the side of the leg where the muscle kind of pulls on the bone. I think it's kind of just above the ankle. They could get I want to say they call it the rider's bone, where you get a little protrusion because as you ride the horse, the muscle pulls on the bone, and over time, it'll cause a protrusion of bone to come out. And you have like basically a little protrusion. I don't know what else to call it. Coming off of the side of the bone on your leg, made of bone. But basically where the legs were holding onto the horse. And you can see that in people that were frequently riding their horses. A lot of this information that I'm getting is not only from documentaries about like identifying dinosaur bones, but there is a fantastic YouTuber that I watch. She's from the Bone Museum, I think. Get her name. Her channel is just the Bone Museum, and she talks a lot about what you can tell about people from their bones, particularly older bones and stuff like that. But she's a very, very informative person, and she will show you the actual bones and the conditions that they were suffering from or whatever you can learn from them. So definitely a channel worth looking at if you're interested in what I'm saying. Again, obviously, I'm not an expert in this, so I'm going to come off more as rambling than educational. But I do find this stuff very fun to talk about because a lot of people don't recognize or realize how much you can actually learn from body parts that we find. Another condition that shows up in the bone pretty significantly is leprosy. Leprosy used to be extremely common back in the old days. It's still common-ish in poorer countries with less access to healthcare. But it was very, very, very common prior to the 1900s, 1950s. It'll like degrade the bones where the sores were because leprosy will cause pull that up. leprosy basically is a long-term infection that causes damage to your nerves, your respiratory tract, your skin, and your eyes, and it can eat away at your skin and eventually eat away at your bones. So you can see the malformations that occur in your bones. It also damages the cartilage in your body, and when you damage cartilage, that also in turn affects the bones because cartilage helps to hold together the bones to the tissues. So I'm looking at pictures, and it causes a lot of malformation of the soft tissues, which in severe cases, untreated, will cause damage to your bones. Unfortunately, because of the way our immune system is, once the skin has been eaten away to a certain degree, it will move on to the bones, and once it hits your bones, it's very hard to treat the diseases because once it hits your bones, open skin, yes, you're very at risk of infection, but once it hits your bones, you're a lot more likely to get like blood infections and stuff that will eventually affect your organs. Particularly sepsis is a huge, still to this day, fatal problem that you can get from ongoing illnesses. Another thing, I'll kind of go back to anatomy. Another thing that you can tell from an animal is how much one thing I forgot to mention, you can tell females from males based on their pelvis. A female is going to have a more bowl-like pelvis, where a male is going to have more of a like flat type pelvis, because a female is going to need more space to contain a baby or eggs, depending on the species it is. So you can also gender an animal based on the size and shape of their hips. But additionally, you can also tell how an animal has been living based on its joints. If you are somebody exposed to heavy labor, if you are running a lot, if you are migrating frequently, you are going to have a lot more wear and tear in the ball and joint area. You can actually tell with peasants versus the rich people. I don't want to say kings because not all of them were kings and queens, but you can tell the amount of physical labor the person was exposed to by the quality of their bones. Not only are they going to have better nutrient access, but they're not going to have as much wear and tear on the joint areas of their bone. Because, as you know, if you're using your body parts more frequently, bones are essentially stone-like materials, living, of course, but it'll wear itself away. Same with the teeth. You can tell what an animal has been eating by the type of teeth and the wear on the type of teeth, or the wear on the teeth. For example, if if an animal is nutrient deficient, their teeth will be worn away, and they are likely going to be missing teeth, or if they've had a lot of health conditions, they might have actual decay showing up in their bones. If you have really bad teeth and you don't do anything about it, it can move into the jaw and cause damage in your jaw. Common with leprosy, common with certain types of cancers, certain types of degenerative disorders. Also, it'll show trauma. If somebody has gotten in any of your bones, really, if you have had an injury, like the man with the arrow in his rib, it'll show signs of healing or lack thereof. And you can tell usually scientists can tell if an injury has been fatal or not. If there is little to no growth after the injury, after the apparent injury, it's likely that the animal passed away from whatever caused that. That's how coroners can identify whether or not or how a person their life was taken, because you can tell based on the bones. Luckily, with coroners, they usually have tissues to also use to judge, but you can tell how that particular animal or person had passed away based on what's showing up inside their bodies. Oftentimes with large animals, leg injuries are nearly fatal, or are nearly always fatal. If you rely on your forelegs and your leg gets broken, you're not going to be able to get away from predators effectively, because typically, not always the case, four-legged animals are, I guess predator. Okay, I'll take that back. Four-legged animals, in general, if you break a leg, you're probably not going to survive, because you're going to need to get away from predators. Or if you are a predator animal, you're not going to be able to get to your prey. And also, it's excruciatingly painful to break a leg bone, a limb bone, because of all of the interactions inside the skeleton. It's making contact with your hand. So using your hand will hurt your arm. Using your shoulder will hurt your arm. Using, even breathing can sometimes cause pain if you have an injury that's close to that area. So yeah, leg bones breaks are usually fatal. Jaw breaks are pretty much always fatal, from what I remember, because if you can't chew properly, you probably aren't going to make it. So yeah, but back to the teeth. You can tell how an animal has been eating based on, or what it eats based on the teeth. For animals that are carnivores, they're going to have sharp teeth, pointed teeth, conical teeth. Whereas herbivores, animals that eat vegetables, they are going to have flat teeth, because when you are a meat eater, you need to not only bite to kill, so you need those sharp teeth that are able to sink into skin, break bones, sever arteries, stuff like that. So you need knife-like teeth. But you also need to have, your jaws are going to be much stronger, because you need to have the strength to clamp onto something and not let go. So you can actually see the jaw bones are formed differently, because there's more muscles attached to the jaw bones than there would be in a plant-eating animal. For example, on humans, on wolves, big cats, stuff like that, you're going to have the jawbone, but then you also have a huge piece right here, that is where the muscle connects everything together. Whereas on whales, they rely on, with baleen whales, they open their mouth, they swim, and then they close their mouth. They swim through the fish or plankton, whatever they're eating, and just close their mouth. So they don't actually have any like plates basically on the sides for the muscle to attach to. They just have the pieces that hold the skin on they basically have like a giant net as a mouth. And so they just have the bone pieces that extend outward, but they don't have anything else on the side. So yeah, the herbivore animals are going to have flat teeth because they are not needing to rip anything, tear anything. They their mouth movement is also different, where carnivores usually chew up and down because they're like ripping stuff off, and then they don't do as much chewing. The plants are very fibrous, and it takes a lot to break it down in a way that is digestible. Because if you don't break it down enough with your teeth, it's going to sit in your body for too long, and you're not going to get nutrients fast enough. So they have to really work at it, break it down into a paste to swallow and eat. And so their teeth are going to be very flat. And you can actually age an animal based on its teeth as well, because older animals are going to have far fewer ridges on the top of their teeth than others, or than younger animals. And I don't remember which animal they were talking about, but I remember watching a documentary about some animal, and they're saying that the animal starved to death because it literally wore its teeth flat and it had no ridges anymore. And so it wasn't able to chew properly, and it just like starved to death because it couldn't eat properly. That would suck. I'm glad we aren't like that. I'm like, oh, sorry, your teeth don't work anymore. Count your days. So we are lucky because we're omnivorous. So we have both types of teeth. We have our front teeth for taking bites out of things. We have residual teeth from when we needed to hunt things. And then we have our flat teeth for grinding up plants. That's also how you can tell what diet an animal had, is by the types of teeth that they have. If they have strictly carnivore teeth, they likely only ate meat. If they have all flat teeth, they only ate plants. But if they had both, they're omnivorous. They're eating both plants and animals. You can also tell if it what was I gonna say? You can also tell if an animal has been involved in like contact and stuff like that, if it had been attacked based on what's going on in their mouth. You can tell diseases. I think I kind of mentioned this earlier, but you can tell diseases by what's going on with the teeth. I don't know if this is true with all animal species, but you can also kind of tell if it's a male or female, particularly with carnivores, because, or I guess not just carnivores, because elephants also have the same thing. But basically, larger teeth can signify that the creature is a male, because not the case all the time, but sometimes males will have larger teeth to show as a way of like dominant behavior. In the same way, like deer have male deer have antlers. Like for example, saber-toothed cats, elephants, some types of monkeys and gorillas. I don't know if lions are the same way, but I know a number of animals, males will have bigger teeth to show for than females will. But so you can, of course, you can also tell its age in the sense that if it has milk teeth, which are much, much smaller versions of the adult teeth, very, very common with babies that are suckling, getting milk from mom. They don't want to have their full teeth at the time because they don't want to bite off the thing that feeds them. So they generally have much smaller, softer teeth that will fall out when they're older, in the same way that humans do. So if they have milk teeth, which again are smaller, more diminutive versions of the adult teeth, they are likely going to be children. And also, that is how you can tell I guess it's kind of self-explanatory, but obviously, if an animal only has its milk teeth, it did not make it to adulthood. You can also tell if an animal had been eaten or predated on by another animal. For example, you can literally have chunks of bone missing. If the bones are, this one I always find really cool. If you find a body, a skeleton, that is basically the bones are where they should be. They're in the same orientation they would be in the body. It like the person, for example, in Pompeii, the bodies that they found, it showed that people were taken by surprise. Like they were not expecting to die. They didn't move around. They were like in fetal positions. They were sleeping. They died where they stood. You can tell if that happened versus they got preyed upon or something else happened, because if you are if an animal gets a hold of your body, it's going to mangle you. You're going to have bones that are in places that it shouldn't be. You might be missing parts of the bones. You might be missing entire parts of the body. And you can actually see the teeth marks in the bones, especially if it was a carnivorous animal. You can see tool marks if a person has been the one to do work on the animal. They can tell the difference between an animal death and a pile of eaten creatures, a refuse pile, because all the bones will have like knife marks on them and stuff like that. So you can actually tell what happened to the body after it died as well, based on what is showing up in the bones. You can also tell if an animal died from natural causes versus unnatural natural causes. Whereas if an animal died of illness or death, illness or injury, they may or may not be in, like, it's very rare circumstances that you'll get the body completely perfectly preserved. There's very few conditions that will allow the body to retain everything without being disturbed. Most of the time, you're only finding like parts of the animal, but there are certain circumstances that allow you to have the whole creature, such as if it falls into a mud or tar pit, if it is immediately covered up by debris, such as in a flood, a minor flood, if it was buried, such as in the case with humans. But you can also, so you can tell the circumstances of its death based on how it was positioned, how it, like the layout of the bones and what happened to it. For example, there was a fossil site where there was a whole bunch of different animals, a whole bunch of species together, but all jumbled up. It was like a huge mess. And I believe they found that it was a landslide, because it tumbled all the animals and like did a bunch of stuff to their bodies. And they all had trauma, but it was all from the same time period. You can carbon date the bones to see when it was from. So you can tell if they had died in a disaster or if it died in a more calm way. You can also, obviously, if it was exposed to lava or fire or smoke or stuff like that, you can see that in the bones as well. In Pompeii, there's in a lot of the people that they found, you can actually see the scorch marks from where the bone or the brain literally boiled inside their skull because of the temperatures of the pyroclastic flow, the ash cloud that is thousands of degrees coming in. And that's also why people are so perfectly preserved in Pompeii, because they were killed and immediately covered up with layers and layers of ash. And stone is anaerobic. It doesn't allow oxygen to make contact with the bones. And that's really the key part is if you prevent oxygen from reaching the bones, it prevents decay because then microbes can't attack the bone. You're likely not getting exposure to water. You're also not getting exposure to the wind because it's uncovered. It's covered. So complete coverage of a skeleton with sediment is in most cases going to preserve it enough for you to retain the entire body. In very rare cases, you can actually preserve it well enough to even preserve the soft tissues. This is far less common, but it is possible. Another thing you can tell, not really from the bones themselves, but just from the when it's encased in stone, it can leave imprints of that animal's skin, feathers, tissues, stuff like that. So you can actually get kind of a snapshot at what the animal looked like on the outside, even if those features are decayed. That's why you can get impression fossils, where the most famous one I can think of is the Archaeopteryx, where you can actually see the feathers and stuff sometimes because it's been like pressed into the mud. Kind of the same way that a stamp, where you're pushing the animal into the whatever material they died in, and it leaves that impression. So you can also understand things about the animal from the things nearby. You can also tell a lot about an animal's death and life based on what surrounded the animal. So if an animal died by itself, likely an injury, predation act, potentially other illness, something like that. Whereas if you see a whole collection of animals of the same kind all dying together, chances are it was a catastrophic event that took out a whole herd. If you have multiple different animals of the same type in one area, or same type of, like if they're all herbivores or something like that, you might have found a hunting ground where an animal like brings its food back to consume, as well as, like I said, with humans, we'll have like refuse piles. So you'll have a whole jumble of different types of bones all put together in one area. Usually indicates that that was a location where we discarded the food that we did not want to eat. Whereas if you have a collection of similar types of animals all in one location, maybe put together, maybe not, that could have been a location of a den, a predator's den. Additionally, you can also, on rare occasions, you can find skeletons inside the skeletons of another animal. And that is going to be one of two things. A, it was eaten, and then the thing that ate it died shortly after, before it was able to digest. Or you had a mother who was pregnant, which that one's very rare to get, but it has happened. You can also find fossilized eggs as well, where it has the egg shell and the baby inside. Obviously, in those cases, you can figure out very quickly what age that creature was, not even born yet. But yeah, you can tell a lot about an animal by the things that, like, by its placement, by what you find on its bones, scorch marks, cracks, what do you call it? Cut marks, like if an animal had been used for food. You can find teeth embedded in bone. You can find objects embedded in bone, which can give you an idea of how they died, or potentially injuries that they sustained while they were alive. As I mentioned, the structure of the bone, the size of the bone, the wear and tear on the bone can give you an indication of how that animal lived. And then you can also identify what exactly it is based on what you're seeing. And this happens if you find creatures that you can't identify, that you've never found before. One of the best things you can do, as I said, bones don't change all that much throughout all time, because they are the body parts are formed based on their purpose, and the purpose of bones has not really changed over time. Just like trees look the same as trees from millions of years ago, even though they're different, they still, like, they have the trunk, they have their branches, they have their leaves, they have their pine cone, whatever. Structure doesn't actually change that much over time, because what it does is it refines. It doesn't make completely new types of bones, because it's the structure it is, because that's how it works. Like, the best way I can explain it is like mechanics. You might have more pieces to the mechanics, or more refined functioning of the mechanics, but the mechanics are still kind of going to be the same. You're still going to have cogs and wheels. You're still going to have things that rotate and things that go into each other, sockets and whatever. It's kind of the same with bones, where throughout history, you're still going to need thick bones to support legs. You're still going to need some form of bones to surround soft tissues and organs. You're still going to need a round, hard, shell type bone to hold in the brain. You're still going to need bones that are smaller to help with moving appendages, small moving appendages. So if you find a creature that has never been seen before, you can find out what it is by comparing it to other creatures. So if you find, based on the stuff that I was saying earlier, if you find something completely new, all you have to do is compare. All right, what do these arm bones look like? What do these leg bones look like? What does this skull look like? What type of teeth does it have? And you can figure out, all right, this is an herbivore. It likely walked on 4 legs. This has a face similar to this creature. So it's likely going to be a descendant of this type of creature. It's likely related to this other type of animal. And through rigorous scientific processes, you can work to identify whether it's a new species, or if it is a completely new lineage and all that stuff. But initially, you can tell what you're looking at roughly based on how the structure presents itself. Not to mention DNA also has a huge role in this, but I'm not going to get into that. So going all the way back to the origin of this question, if you had a chicken, a cow, a pig, all the bones were jumbled up, you knew nothing about it, you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. That's simply not true. You would be able to, I promise you, even somebody that has no experience in bone science, just biological science in general, you can tell the difference between a chicken and a pig. You can tell the difference between a pig and a cow. I promise there's a lot of differences. I won't get into all of it, but all three of them are gonna have different limb looks. Chickens don't even have teeth. Pigs have sharp teeth. Cows have flat teeth. I think if I remember correctly, pigs are 4-toed ungulates and cows are 2-toed ungulates. They might both be. There's two types of ungulates. There's 2-toed and 4-toed. So I think if I remember correctly, even-toed, odd-toed. Let's see. Yeah, look, I think pigs and cows are both even-toed ungulates. I'll have to do a whole different thing. I should do that on like animal genealogy. Anyway, they're different. You can definitely tell the difference between the cow and the pig and the chicken. And I think it's very foolish to suggest that we as humans are completely oblivious about the world and we know absolutely nothing. Yes, I do believe that there is a God that created our earth, but I also believe that he gave us knowledge for a reason. If God did not want us to explore the mysteries of the universe, if God did not want us to know what he has done and what he's created, he wouldn't have given us the opportunity to learn. He wouldn't have given us science. He wouldn't have given us a brain. He would have made us all like pigeons, just booping around, not knowing anything. So dinosaurs exist. I know a lot of people don't want to believe it because of creation, but personally, I just think that maybe we got the timeline wrong or something like that in the Bible. They might have miswritten the dates or something, but they definitely exist. There are bones all over the planet, from North America, Asia, South America, Antarctica. They're all over, and there's so many different species. And you can see dinosaurs within chickens today. The bones that are in chickens are similar to the bones that are in dinosaurs. The bones that are in cows and pigs are similar to the bones that are in elephants. The bones that are in humans are the same as the bones of humans millions of years ago. We are all connected. God has made life. He has made the structure of life, and life has in turn turned into a wide variety of creation. So yeah, I know this was kind of a back and forth rambly kind of conversation, but there's a lot to this. It was hard for me to kind of organize it in my head because there's a lot going on. I'm always thinking of other things I want to mention. But I hope that this was something that was educational for you, that you learned something new, that you found a new interest perhaps, because learning about bodies in general is fascinating. There's so much to it. There's so much to forensic archaeology, forensic science in modern day. This applies to so many different things that we don't even really think of. This applies to medical science. This applies to criminal science. This applies to archaeology, understanding how the world works, understanding how we affect the creatures around us. You can see changes in the bodies because of climatic changes. You can see changes in the body due to food accessibility, due to illnesses. It's all interconnected. And the more we learn about bodies, the more we can understand about ourselves, our health, and everything around us. So I highly suggest, if something piqued your interest, look into it. That is exactly what science is. It's, I don't know this thing, so let me find out. And I always say, like to say, we don't know everything. We will never know everything, but it's the fun of it. Like, you have to find joy out of learning new things and constantly expanding, and accept that you're never going to know everything. But allowing yourself to find interest in the world around you, because that's really what makes us better. It's the willingness to keep learning, to keep finding new things to explore, and just to find joy out of the world, out of interest in the world, because there's a lot out there. There's a lot to learn, and again, there's some crazy stories. There's some really interesting stuff out there. So if you wanted to learn more about bones and what they reveal, the Museum of Bones, I think that's what it's called, the Bone Museum. Her name is, there's also Lauren the Mortician. They both talk about the body and what you can find. And then also, it's a little bit, it's not exactly scientific, but they do apply a lot of scientific principles. The TV show Bones is also a really interesting glimpse into what forensic science can look like. Obviously, it is dramatized, but they do apply realistic things to the TV show, so you can kind of see the types of things that forensic scientists look for when they are investigating a body. But yeah, if this stuff interests you, I look into it, because I still, to this day, learn new things about what you can find out in the body. And yeah, I very much enjoyed talking about this. And again, I hope you learned something new. And I hope you guys have a good day. I will see you guys on Friday.
Examining his own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the course of the Cold War.